In any major news story, society is exposed to extreme opinions from the editors and publishers of a source. This media bias warps reality to fit the agenda of the opposing political parties. Large news channels purposely exclude certain information to better suit their narrative. After the attacks on September 11, 2001, the US sent troops into Afghanistan to bring down the Taliban and find the perpetrators. The troops overthrew the Taliban government, but the new one set in place needed support to control the people. Up until August 2021, the troops stayed in Afghanistan. Biden pulling troops out of Afghanistan created lots of controversy. Mainstream media evaluated the news in many different ways, and some of which were largely misconstrued. In the withdrawal of the troops from Afghanistan, mass media criticized the facts through cultural and historical lenses, swaying public opinion.
The United States' withdrawal from Afghanistan encouraged a split in political belief. Using a cultural critical lens, one can identify these biases. News outlet CNN wrote an article titled "Biden's Botched Afghan Exit is a Disaster at Home and Abroad Long in the Making," stating that it's a political disaster for Joe Biden, whose failure to orchestrate an urgent and orderly exit will further rock a presidency plagued by crisis and stain his legacy. During this time, President Biden had just been elected in the presidency, dividing the countries politically. The withdrawal from Afghanistan, and whether it was the right decision or not, gave the people who didn't agree with Biden a chance to show their disapproval. In this article from CNN, one can see this political viewpoint later when it states, "I asked President Biden to stop finding excuses for his own mistakes and address the country in person," said by House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy of California. Another article written by Brookings titled "The U.S. Decision to Withdraw from Afghanistan is the Right One" states that the Biden administration decision to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan by September 11, 2021 is a wise strategic choice that took significant political courage. Looking at this article, one can see the complete opposite political viewpoint of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. It also demonstrates that those who agree with Biden and those who support him in the election showed their approval for the decision. Given these two articles, one can see these cultural biases are split among political parties.
This is a total failure by the United States government. It's a total failure by the commander-in-chief. It's a total failure, really, by the American people.
To understand the decisions President Biden has taken in Afghanistan, we need to understand the decisions taken by his predecessor, Donald Trump.
The sudden evacuation of U.S. troops also had a significant historical context. The U.S. and Afghanistan have been intertwined for over 50 years. The story starts in the Cold War, when both the Soviet Union and the American government sought control of the country. Soviet forces invaded, and the U.S. retaliated by arming a group of native rebel fighters, the same fighters who would later form a terrorist group known as the Taliban. When the Cold War ended, both Allied powers pulled out, and the country plunged into a brutal civil war, which allowed the fleeting Taliban to begin seizing power. For the majority of the 90s, the U.S. simply didn't interact with the country until the 9/11 terrorist attacks caused the U.S. to come raging back in the desert nation, thus starting the 20-year-long War on Terror. Even after the Taliban had been nearly crushed, and for the most part retreated into more rural areas, the U.S. kept an occupying force of the country, safeguarding it and aiding Afghan officials in constructing a government in our own image. When Biden came to power, the war was considered, for the most part, over, even as Taliban forces started to rally. The U.S. military pulled out in a matter of days and with little warning, resulting in a huge power vacuum that allowed the Taliban to take over the country in a matter of days. The general consensus by historians is that the military maneuver was a critical failure, one of the worst the U.S. has ever executed. Media plays a large role in swaying public opinion through the lenses they use. Instead of simply reporting the basic facts of Biden pulling troops from Afghanistan, they use cultural and historical lenses to invoke certain feelings from the audience. Mass media used recent election of Biden as a talking point to sway public opinion to the left or right, causing a political divide. People focus more on creating more tension and divide than actually covering the stories and informing the people. Mass media also used this historical lens to bring up long built-up tension about whether or not American troops belonged in Afghanistan in the first place. The media, again, brought up actions from the past presidents to create more divide among society. Large media sources are now used to sway political opinion instead of simply informing the people. and it's working. Media bias plays a huge role in the people's response towards political actions, and the growth in media bias has directly affected the growth in divide among the American people.
The chaotic and deadly U.S. evacuation from Afghanistan stunned Americans and the world and cost the lives of 13 U.S. soldiers. Now a damning new report blames the Biden administration for being slow to evacuate U.S. citizens and Afghan allies, according to an Army investigation first obtained by the Washington Post. One national security official saying an evacuation would signal we have failed. According to the report, 3 days before Kabul fell, Rear Admiral Peter Vasely, the top commander in Afghanistan, sounding alarms to acting U.S. Ambassador Ross Wilson. But another military official telling investigators the embassy needed to position for withdrawal and the ambassador didn't get it.
Deputy White House National Security Advisor, what is your overall assessment, listening to him and everything else you know, of how the administration's handled this aftermath of the collapse of the Afghan government?
I have a lot of respect for John. I know he's been involved with SIV, Special Immigrant Visa issues, for probably close to a decade, and it's really been a leader in this space. I frankly think the issue is not some of the hardworking individuals who've been on this, but the fact that the problem starts at the top. This is not an issue that President Biden ever prioritized. I was part of a bipartisan group of lawmakers going back to April that were trying to raise the attention in just the scenario that we feared, to make sure that we did everything we could as soon as we could to get these special immigrant visa applicants out. And again, there are a lot of hardworking folks who were trying to make that happen. But frankly, this is an issue that President Biden didn't want to have to deal with. But you can only spin optics for so long. You can't spin away this reality we're facing today.